Hey everyone, it's Helen from S&B Deal Hunter. Today we have Jeremy Ames with us. Jeremy is the co-founder and CEO of Guidant Financial, which specializes in 401k business financing. Jeremy, it's great to have you today.
Thanks, Helen. Glad to be here.
So tell us, Jeremy, tell us a little bit more about your background, sort of how did you get into such a niche space and, starting Guidant?
Yeah, it's funny. I often get people who ask me, how did you come up with this idea? And I tell them that's not usually how business works. Typically, we stumble into it, and our story was similar. So, my first business that I ever started was a real estate company. And through that, I got connected to my longtime business partner, David Nilsson. And we started doing some real estate development projects together. And one of the development projects we were doing was on the peninsula in Washington State. We bought a plot of land, and what we did was subdivide it into plats. And then the strategy was to put down a cement foundation and secure mobile homes to those. Because once we did that, you could remove off of title the fact that it was a mobile home. And that opened it up for traditional financing like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which opened up a whole number of buyers that could buy it because they could do it with small amounts down. And so, anyway, we're putting this project together. And so we meet with these attorneys because we're going to have them set up individual entities for each of these plats. We went with a sort of domino approach to funding. Fund one project, start moving on it, fund the next one, start moving on that. And that's how we were going to go about it. And they said, have you thought about using self-directed IRAs? And we said, what are you talking about? And we got an education on all these things that you could use retirement funds to invest in that we had no idea. Our understanding at the time was that your retirement funds could only be invested in really boring stuff like mutual funds, ETFs, bonds. And they introduced us to this whole lengthy, confusing tax code that was related to alternative investments. And when we went out to our network, we ended up getting about 2/3 of the funding for our development project through people's retirement funds. People were excited about it. A, no one knew it existed. And B, they were excited about the idea of being able to put those funds to work in something that was more active and that they felt more of a connection to. And so we told them, we will take care of getting the account set up for you. And we worked with these attorneys to set up these accounts. And in the process, learned this was really confusing and kind of painful, actually. And so our initial foray into this business when we set up Guidant Financial was, hey, we're going to create a way to make it easier for people to get their funds in a place where they can use these to invest in alternative assets. And primarily when we started the company 21 years ago, that was focused on real estate-based assets. So foreclosure sales, tax liens, things like that. But we pretty quickly started finding our niche audience advertising on Google. And about 10% of the people that would come to us would say, hey, I want to invest in this company. And we'd ask them a few questions and find out that they're going to actively be managing or participating in that company. And then we'd have to tell them you can't do that inside of a self-directed IRA. And we got really, really good at telling people no about this, just like we got really good at telling people, no, you can't buy your own mortgage with a self-directed IRA. And one of the prospects we were talking to one day said, well, yeah, I can. I've been working with the CPA in California, and here's what he told me. So we asked him a bunch more questions to download some of this information, thinking we need to figure out what this charlatan is all about and expose this and update our little spiel that we have on why you can't do this. And we did our initial research and we're blown away. We're like, here's another thing that appears legitimate you can invest your retirement funds in, provided you're willing to live within the restrictions of the regulations. And so we decided to hire an ERISA attorney, and we said, we really want you to dig in on the legality of this and help us understand, is this legitimate? And if so, how should we think about structuring something that would help customers be able to use retirement funds to do this? And he came back and said, absolutely, this is legitimate. People have been doing it since 1974. He said, but most of what you have probably seen, if you've seen it at all, is that it's high net worth individuals who are using this to invest in companies, and they're leveraging high cost attorneys or CPAs that are really specialized. In fact, I think Peter Thiel famously has $1 billion IRA. You can guess how he got $1 billion IRA. It's because he invested in PayPal using retirement funds. And so he came back with this research, and we said, fantastic, we'd like to make you a job offer to come on at Guidant and build this division out for us because we think there's a huge need and a huge opportunity here. And so he did that. He came on and he worked for us until he retired several years ago. And we started doing more and more businesses. At this point, we've helped launch more than 30,000 small businesses across the 20 years that we've been doing this. And it's been a fun ride. It's been fun to be both in the position of creating our own path to personal freedom through business ownership, but at the same time, unlocking access for lots of other people who maybe didn't think they had a path to get there, but were able to find it once they realized, hey, I have this asset that I can use to invest in something that can help me move my life forward.
No, it's very exciting. I feel like, not enough people know about this Rob's 401k program. So excited to dive in. I guess, can you give us just the overview of what the program entails, especially, I guess, as it applies to folks who are looking to leverage it for business acquisition financing?
Yeah, well, the first thing to be clear about, because this is often a confusion for people, is this is not borrowing money from your retirement plan. This has to be structured in a way where your retirement account is becoming an owner of the business. So literally, if you look at the stock ledger of the businesses for the companies that we help, there is going to be a line on that stock ledger that says Helen Guo's 401k plan, and it's going to say how many shares and what percentage you own. And by nature of it being a retirement plan, a lot of people get confused too because they think, well, this is my retirement plan, so this is me and I can do whatever I want. Well, that's not really true because the government, in terms of the IRS, has a stake in that money, meaning for the most part, they haven't received any taxes on that money if you put that money in tax deferred. So they want to make sure that you're making decisions for that retirement account that are in the best long-term interest of the retirement plan. And so there are a few hoops that have to be jumped through to make sure that this passes muster. So one of the most common ones is that you have to have a C corporation. And the reason you have to have a C corporation is because you're going to have a shareholder that's not an actual human person. So it's the same reason you can't have a private equity company that's owning a stake in an S corp, right? It's going to blow up the fact that it's an S corp. So this is maybe the most common thing that is different than what you typically see in a small business. Most small businesses are going as an S corp or an LLC. They're trying to pay themselves as little as possible and then pass everything through as dividends. Using retirement funds is much more powerful if you're trying to build long-term equity. And it's actually gotten more compelling over the last 5 or 6 years because the C corp tax rates have dropped. So they're actually much lower in terms of what's paid going in. But these other restrictions are really set up to protect your retirement plan. So the other thing is you have to make sure it's for fair market value. That doesn't come up for most people, but if you were going to bring some assets or if you were going to try and buy something essentially from yourself, you're going to have to get a third-party valuation. But for most people, it doesn't make sense to get into any of those complexities until and unless they have some type of a deal that they want to move forward with. And then you can get into the sort of specifics of it. So the biggest one is really a C corp, because what's going to happen is you're going to set up a C corp. That C corp is going to sponsor a new retirement plan, a 401k. And then the funds are going to get rolled from wherever they exist today in your Fidelity IRA or your Transamerica 401k into this new 401k that's sponsored by the C corp. And then the 401k plan is going to make an investment in the C corp. And in exchange, it's going to get stock and the C corp is going to get cash. And then the C corp is going to go out and use that cash to buy the assets, buy the stock of the business. Or in many cases, we'll have clients who will have the cash there, and then they will use that cash as a down payment to go out and get an SBA loan. So in fact, I just talked to a client several weeks ago who had about $1 million in a retirement plan, and he used that. He bought stock in the C Corp for that $1 million, and then went out and got an SBA loan for a business that was 5.3, right? So he was able to leverage that cash into a business that was of a size where it could produce an income that was meaningful for him and a business that was exciting for him to own and grow.
No, that's super exciting. And just for clarification purposes, can you leverage your 401k for the entire down payment of, a business you're buying, that down payment for the SBA loan?
Yeah, you can. What I would suggest people consider is that anytime you're going to use debt in a business, you're now upping the risk factor of that business because now you have a good portion of the cash flow of the income of that company that's going to go out the door to the bank, regardless of what's happening in the economic cycle or what's happening in the business. And so it just doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room if you have some kind of a downturn. So if you're going to use 100%, you can. There's nothing that would legally prohibit you from doing it. But I am a big advocate of if you're going to do that, you better make sure that you have a plan B of where you're going to get funds if and when you need them.
Yeah, 100%. I guess with ROMs, what are the types of businesses that you can fund? What are some limitations there?
In terms of what kind of businesses can't you buy?
Yeah.
The two most common ones that come up, you can't invest in a business that is primarily the investment of capital. And I'm doing my little quotation marks here with my hands because primarily the investment of capital can mean a lot of things. But for example, one thing could be you couldn't buy a factoring business where the primary role of the business was to, buy these financial instruments and then resell them. The other one would be it's got to be something that's federally legal. So you couldn't go out because this is a retirement plan. You couldn't go out and start your cannabis farm with this because your retirement plan is guided by federal regulations. And regardless of what your state allows, you're going to run into restrictions there. And I won't get into all the cannabis laws because I'm no expert in that. But those are every once in a while we get weird things. We get lots of people that come to us with cannabis related business, or somebody wanted to start a brothel once and we're like, yeah, we're not touching that. But other than that, there's not typically restrictions on the type of business. It's really just about, do you have a compelling investment opportunity that's worth it for the 401k to invest in?
That makes sense. And what about just requirements that, you know, I or someone as the borrower has to meet?
You mean you have to meet in order to move forward with using your retirement funds?
Yeah.
Um, I think the biggest thing is you got to recognize that you're going to be operating with a C corporation. And so that's different. It's not bad. I actually don't think it's worse. There's many pros of C corps that are different and sometimes better than S corps. You just have to know that. And the most critical thing is making sure that you've got a CPA who understands that. Because a lot of small business CPAs are really so focused on the S corp LLC thing.
Yeah.
In fact, we've had to fix a number of different issues from clients over the years where they'll get to their CPA and their CPA will go, we're converting this C corp to an S corp. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, now we got a whole cleanup thing that we need to do. So first thing is make sure you're working with people who understand the difference in the structure so they don't inadvertently do something that's going to mess it up. Second is compensation. You have to pay yourself a fair market wage. And really that's there to protect your retirement plan. So if you are buying a massage franchise and you are managing and running this as the CEO, but this is a business that does 750,000 in revenue and generates 75,000 in profit, it's probably not a fair market wage to pay yourself $250,000 for that particular thing. Now, you may, at the point that you get that thing to 10 units or 15 units or 20 units, that may totally make sense. But it needs to be a fair market wage, which is actually not usually an issue with small business owners. Small business owners almost always go the other way, where they are underpaying themselves and then trying to create all these sort of fringe benefits within the business. And then maybe the third thing to mention is you have to be careful if you have other things you're going to interact with the business. So let's say you own a piece of real estate personally and you want to lease that real estate to the business. Those are things you have to be careful of, and you have to cross your T's and dot your I's as it relates to third-party valuations or things that are going to demonstrate and show that the business and the 401k plan's investment are getting a fair deal. And it's not just a way that you're trying to use these retirement funds to then push money into your pocket this other way.
No, that makes sense. And what about just in terms of, best time to engage with, Guidant? Is that like if I'm looking to buy a business in the next year, let's say,
Yeah.
Is it too early for me now to engage with you guys, even if I'm just, searching, I don't have something under LOI, or yeah, when is ideal time for you guys?
Man, I will give you my philosophy of what I think makes sense for most people, but I'll just say I like to take more of a first principles approach rather than a hey, this is what makes sense for everybody. So from a first principles approach, I don't think it makes sense to go shopping for something until you know what your budget is. So I wouldn't go on a search for a business until I was pretty clear that I knew somewhat what my funding range was going to be. Otherwise, I'm going to get to the negotiating table and I don't know what I'm working with. I don't know where my bottom line is of where I need to stop. I don't know what part of the terms are important. And that's especially true if you want to consider looking at multiple funding options. So often we're having conversations with customers about SBA loans, retirement funds, maybe unsecured financing, maybe a partner's coming in. So infrequently is someone using 100% retirement funds and only retirement funds from one person, period. Often it's an amalgamation of different sources. And in that case, I think you probably want to have your plan as part of starting your shopping exercise. And so it may behoove people to do that a little bit earlier. We do have a pre-qualification tool on our website that we've built primarily for that reason. Like, hey, come in here, put some information in about yourself, and then try and understand what financing options would you generally be qualified for, and then understand about the ranges you might be before you start getting into the details. Because obviously, when it comes to lending, especially, there's a lot of fine print detail that comes up as you get closer and closer to closing something.
No, that makes sense. And how long does this process in particular take? Can you kind of walk us through what that process looks like?
Yeah, the biggest variable is who's holding your money today. So different custodians have different practices in terms of how they process and release retirement funds. So Fidelity, for example, is pretty slow. I think they do it once a month. They make you have perfect paperwork. It's almost trying to get an insurance company to pay for something because they don't want to release your money. They want to keep it and keep using it and leveraging it in their system. So some like Fidelity can be slower, but on average, most clients take 30 to 40 days for everything encompassed in C Corp getting filed, so the entity getting set up, the 401k getting established and adopted, the funds getting rolled over, the stock transaction getting executed, and then money sitting in their C Corp now able to go do the deal.
Got it. No, that's pretty fast. What about just time investment? Like how much time should someone allocate to getting this piece done?
Again, the biggest time investment is going to be with the potential current custodian, and it can vary wildly. That can be a 10-minute call. It can be 45-minute calls, depending on who that custodian is. But that's something we help clients with along the way. So I wouldn't say that part's a huge time investment. An SBA loan, by the way, if you're going to do that on top, you need to think very differently about timelines, and you need to think very differently about time investment because SBA loans can take a long time. Lenders will typically tell you, oh, we can get this done in 60 days. But the reality of what we see is it's more like 90 to 180, and sometimes even longer. You may get a pre-approval, but then the lender may say, hey, before I'm going to lend on this deal, I need you to secure the real estate and I need you to get your final TI quote. And then what will happen is the TI quote's going to come in different than what the person was expecting in their projections. And now they got to re-underwrite the thing again. So stuff can happen in that process. So it depends on the combination of funding you're going to use, but using retirement funds is relatively quick compared to most other funding options.
Got it. And what I guess any other sort of pros and cons, I guess folks should be aware of.
Yeah, the one thing to be aware of is, if you're going to use retirement funds to invest in a business, you're going to end up with a 401k plan. And that 401k plan requires annual administration, right? It essentially has to file a tax return every year with the IRS. So we do that for our clients. We're essentially a third-party administrator. We have over 8,000 customers that we serve where we do this work for them on an annual basis. And that does take a little bit of time, but that time varies dramatically based on how big the business is. So really small businesses can be relatively quick and painless. The larger business you have, the more time it's going to take. We have in the past handful of years rolled out a payroll business unit and a bookkeeping business unit because one of the greatest pieces of friction that happens for a business owner is they have to get all this data to us in order for us to do our work. And so we end up chasing them and nagging them for months and months and months, and they put it off, put it off, put it off until it's the last minute. And then they're trying to figure out where to get this stuff. So we've ended up building some of these other services in-house so we can say, listen, if you don't want to have to do that, you can just do your payroll with us. And then we don't have to chase you for the data. We're already going to have it. We're already going to have it. We're going to have it in the format we need. And you'll have to do very, very little at the end of the year, except answer a few questions to make sure nothing has changed, maybe validate a few things for us and move forward.
No, that's funny because it sounds like if someone went and tried to figure this out for themselves, they have to work with so many different parties, spend so much time. It sounds like there's real savings here. I guess I'm curious in terms of, you mentioned a little bit, the sort of ongoing costs. What are the sort of general costs associated, with working with you guys to get the setup and sort of
Yep.
continuous maintenance costs?
Yeah, so we have a transactional fee that we charge up front that includes everything. It includes the setup of the entity. It includes time with an outside attorney. It includes the setup of the 401k plan, the support on the stock transaction, and it's $5,000 essentially for that. That is not dependent on how much you roll. So it doesn't matter whether you're rolling $40,000 or $4 million. We charge the same because it's the same amount of work. It doesn't matter how much money is coming in. But it does mean that, if you have less than $100,000, it's probably worth asking yourself a few questions about whether this is going to be the best path to fund it, because there is that transactional cost up front. On an annual basis, most of our clients pay about $150 a month. It can go up a little bit from there as the retirement plans get more complex, but that only happens when people have more employees, which can only happen when they have much more revenue. So 401k plans, the filing of the tax return and some of the things that have to get done get more complex as the business grows.
That's no, that makes sense. And
But here's the other thing I'll say, Helen. A lot of people underappreciate this. By going down this path, you end up with a retirement plan for your business. So if you're just thinking through the lens of this is going to help me fund my company, like that's a portion of it, but you're also now ending up with this thing that can be a benefit vehicle and a way that you can use to recruit good talent into your business.
no, that makes sense. And I guess in terms of other sort of restrictions, what, can I still borrow money to say like buy a house if I leverage this? What other sort of restrictions should I be aware of?
Yeah. So you have the ability with your retirement plan to borrow up to $50,000, provided you have at least double that in your retirement plan. So that doesn't go away, but obviously you have to have that much extra cash still in your retirement plan in order to borrow it. It's pretty frequent that we have clients who are either not rolling 100% of their funds or not using 100% of their retirement funds to buy stock in the business. So they may roll 200,000 into the C Corp because that's what they need to go out and buy this business, but they may leave 50,000, 100,000, 300,000 still there, that they could continue to invest in traditional stocks, bonds, mutual funds. They could potentially borrow up to that 50K if they need. And in the future, if they wanted to, they could potentially do a second stock transaction. Now, the one thing to point out is if you do multiple stock transactions, when you go to do that next stock transaction, that has to be for fair market value. And you can get to fair market value when you first buy a business because, Helen, you're going to go negotiate with this seller over here to buy this company. That by nature is the definition of fair market value. You have two opposing parties trying to jockey for the best price. But when you sit on both sides of the transaction and it's your retirement plan and you selling the stock to the retirement plan, now you got to get a valuation expert involved because there needs to be somebody that's setting an independent value on that can be relied on for tax purposes. And that has a cost that goes along with it. Typically, those are a couple $1,000s for the type of valuation you'd need to support that.
Got it. Okay. No, that makes sense. I guess, going back to Guidant a little bit, can you just talk a little bit about sort of some of the benefits of going with Guidant versus maybe another provider out there? Um, what's your guys' track record like? Just speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously biased because I've been here for 21 years, but I think the reason we've been here for 21 years is because we care about the small businesses we serve. Um, and if you don't believe me, if I showed you my P&L, Helen, you would believe me because you'd see we don't make any money on the front end transaction with a client. That all goes out the door to pay for marketing for the team that sets all this stuff up initially. There's nothing left there. We only make money when people stay in business and can continue to pay us. And so we have a vested interest in making sure clients stay compliant and continue to operate and be successful going forward. And so we've expanded the kind of support that we provide with that in mind. I mean, I told you a little bit earlier about how we rolled out a payroll and a bookkeeping business unit. It's not because I'm super excited about having a payroll business or a bookkeeping business within what we do. It's just by nature of I have still never met a business owner who is like, oh, I can't wait to get started in my own business because I love paperwork and I'm super good at it. No business owner likes it because it is a drag on your time that pulls you away from the stuff that's actually going to lead to the success you need. And that is something we keep first and foremost in our mind is like, what can we take off of a client's plate? How can we streamline this? How can we take you out of the position of trying to be a middleman or middlewoman for data? Because no offense, but you suck at it.
No, it's true. It's true. That all makes sense.
And
Curious,
as I said, Helen, we've done over 30,000 of these. So we've seen just about everything out there. And one of the things that we do as part of our TPA service, so the administration we do for the 401k plans, is we offer what we call audit protection. And we do it to protect Guidant as much as we do it to protect our customers, which just means if and when your plan ever gets audited, we're going to pay for really competent representation for you on your behalf for two reasons. One, it keeps us up to speed on exactly what's happening at the Department of Labor and the IRS, how they're thinking about these plans, how they're looking at these plans, what they're concerned about. And the second is the worst thing you could do as a person is try and step in and talk to the IRS and try to explain what you think you did with your retirement plans. Because I can tell you, no matter how much of our educational material you've read, you're going to do a very poor job of it. And it may create more confusion and more pain and more cost for you in the future.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And those audits are no joke. For us, it's typically $20,000 to $25,000 per audit that we end up spending for attorney's fees. Because as you can imagine, the IRS and DOL are not particularly efficient. So these things can drag out for years before they close out.
And what does your team look like now? You guys have, it seems like you guys have been growing a lot.
Yeah, we have about 240 people across 8 countries that work on various aspects of this, right? As I said, we've got payroll, we've got bookkeeping and tax, we've got a large 401k administration team, we've got our own technology team that's constantly looking for ways. In fact, they're right now building. One of the things we're seeing is that clients get data in all sorts of forms from different providers they have. And so it is a zoo for them to think about how to translate this information into communicating to us the questions that we're asking about. And so we have a huge AI project being built right now that's saying, hey, no matter what documents you drop in here, our AI system is going to read these and then translate it into the format we need so we can do the work. And that way, we're recognizing this is a weakness that most of our clients have. It's not a good use of their time. So let's invest in the technology to really move this forward, make it easy for them.
That's super smart. That's so interesting. I guess last question for me today. Any favorite success stories from clients you guys worked with?
I have so many. I interview clients all the time. So maybe two I'll mention that have recently happened. One was a guy who bought a franchise and one was a guy who set up his own sort of startup that came from an interesting idea. So the first guy, when I was talking to him, he was telling me that the best gift he ever got was being laid off by his company because he got a severance and he was so stressed in his job that it was almost a relief to him. He told me the next day after he went to the gym And then he called his doctor and he said, I'm getting off my anxiety meds in the next 30 days. And the doctor was like, whoa, let's maybe talk about this. And he's like, no, I want you to drop them by half now. And then 30 days, we're completely going off of them. And what was interesting in talking to him is that he said, sure, owning a business can be stressful. He's like, but it's a different kind of stress. He still feels the stress, but it's not the same like choking stress that he felt in his corporate job. And the big reason he pointed to is that he has control in his own business. If there's something that's given him anxiety that he doesn't like, he can do something about it. And that wasn't always the case in his corporate job, where he often felt pressure, but it was pressure by these goals and expectations and priorities that he didn't necessarily buy into or believe or knew weren't going to work. And the second one I'll mention was an individual who he decided that he was done. His job came to him and said, if you want to keep your job, we need you to move to, I don't know where it was, Indianapolis or upstate New York or something. And he lives in Florida. And he was like, I am not moving from Florida to there. So they ended up giving him a small severance as well. And so he's like, he'd been thinking about starting a business for years and years and years. So he was like, I am going to figure this out. And he was starting to like play around and ask people questions. And one day his wife goes to him and says, you need to clean out the garbage bins, because these garbage bins that you put out every week, the city brings you, and they just get nasty over time. Right. And he looks in this thing and he's like, I am not doing that. There has got to be somebody out there that can do this. And so he starts researching for someone to do it. He found one guy that was in like Southern Florida. So, a couple hours away. And he called him and the guy said, it doesn't make sense for me to come out there and drive out there to do your bins for $10 or $15. But the guy said to him, but I have this modified truck that I've built to clean these bins. Would you like to buy one? And so this guy ended up buying this. Well, before he bought the truck, he actually went, he did one of those survey things where he stood outside the grocery store and he just started talking to people. And what he told himself is if he could get 60 people that would pre-sign up for this thing, that he was going to buy the truck and he was going to go for it. And he got so much positive response from people that were like, yes, I want that bin cleaned. And no, there's no way I want to do that nasty thing. If you told me I could pay you $10 a month and you're going to come wash this thing for me every month, I'm in. And so he rolled over his retirement funds, used that to buy his first truck. Now he's got 3 or 4 trucks. And what I thought was brilliant when I talked to this guy is he took this idea and he actually went, one of the neighboring cities that's near him is a city that proclaims itself to be green. And he was talking to them about this. And one of the things that he found out pretty quickly when he was out there talking to people is that the people who didn't move forward with getting their bins washed, do you know what they would do to clean their bins?
I don't want to know.
Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. They would pour bleach in it and
Wow.
like mix it around for a little bit and then dump it. Well, in Florida, what you dump that goes down the drains in front of your house does not go into like some wastewater treatment plant. It like goes into the canals and things that drain into the natural waterways. And so he goes and meets with the city and he's in this meeting with the city and he's telling these people that. And one of the city leaders goes, there's no way people do that. And it's like dead silence. And then this one guy in the room raises his hand to her. And he goes, what? He goes, I do. He says, I do that. I didn't even know it was bad. And from that, he got a contract for 8,000 homes. The city just said, what we're going to do is we're going to put this out to bid and we're going to require that the waste management companies have this as an add-on service for every customer in our city. And so what he did then is he went to the 3 waste management companies and he gave them the wholesale deal so that, because the city always has to get multiple bids. So the city came back, they had 3 bids, but he was the service provider underlying all 3 of these bids in terms of who was going to wash the bins. So anyway, what's super cool about his story and what I love about most stories is, he's telling me about how hard he worked in the first 2 years, but he said now he's like, it's everything I wanted it to be from the standpoint. He's like, I don't miss my kids' soccer games. He's like, if there's something I want to do, I go do it. And at the end of the day, that resonates with me because that freedom, that's really the underlying motivation that drives all of us that are going down this path. Even when people say it's money, it's really about freedom. It's, I think if I have enough money, I'm going to have the freedom of time to spend with the people I love, doing the things I love, and being able to actually focus on the impact I want to make in the world. And so that stuff gets me fired up. Sorry if I'm
No,
rambling
that's
here.
100% right. I feel the same way. That's the same reason I kind of fell into entrepreneurship. So that definitely resonates with me. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot. I'm certain other people who are going to be listening to this are going to feel the same way. So really, thank you so much. Have a good, I guess, great rest of your day and a fantastic weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks, Helen.